Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where it seems that Marvel Studios is in the process of trying to drum up some positive publicity for a change. And no, they didn't take my advice about greenlighting a Black Widow movie, but it seems they've taken some of my advice from a few months ago, and that's that they should totally hire Ava DuVernay to direct Black Panther. Yes! It seems that this is actually happening. The Wrap yesterday reported a rumor late in the day that Ava DuVernay is in talks with Marvel Studios to direct one of their quote-unquote diverse films. And the Wrap took that to mean that it's either Black Panther or Captain Marvel, because that's going to have a female lead. But let's be honest, it would be ridiculous not to put Ava DuVernay on Black Panther. I think she needs that movie, and I think Marvel needs her to be on that movie. And I applaud Marvel for making the call, and I also applaud Ava DuVernay for taking the call. We've discussed that some indie or artistic filmmakers have been a little reluctant to get on the superhero bandwagon, but I think they're only really hurting themselves, and actually hurting superhero movies, right? Why not elevate the genre, as we're seeing so many other directors do, namely Christopher Nolan and George Miller with Mad Max Fury Road that I just saw last night. My review is up. The short of it is, it's one of the best movies of all time. So why shouldn't Ava DuVernay come in and work her magic on Black Panther? And also, it might get more people to see Selma. If you haven't seen Selma yet, what are you waiting for? It's an amazing movie. It's so well done, and it has a lot of really tense, action-y sequences, even in Selma. So I definitely think Ava DuVernay is ready to handle a big blockbuster movie, an action movie like Black Panther. So that's why I think that she needs it. And she has other movies that she's working on, but this is going to take her to the next level. And we could see, I think Pitch Perfect 2 is going to really help Elizabeth Banks' career, and I think that this could really help Ava DuVernay's career. And you're finally going to see some female filmmakers really get in on the game, not just be like token directors that are brought up occasionally being like, oh yeah, women direct, what are you talking about? But actually be competitive at the box office, which would be a huge deal. I mean, Kathryn Bigelow has made some inroads, but she hasn't been able to sustain them. I mean, where is Kathryn Bigelow, right? So I think that we want to see some female directors get on the board and work consistently. And I think that this would help Ava DuVernay to do that, especially if she keeps a diverse resume, which is what she seems to be wanting to do. Now, as I said, not only does she need Black Panther, but Marvel needs her to direct Black Panther. And that's because this is incredibly sensitive material. Some of us, including myself, were already upset to hear the rumor that part of the Civil War storyline will be that Black Panther has to go to the UN, T'Challa, because Wakanda can't keep vibranium protected. It keeps getting stolen by Hydra, etc. And as many of you pointed out, and as I pointed out as well, that's a little bit embarrassing for T'Challa, that he can't, keep track or handle his own country and needs assistance from the outside world. It needs to be forced upon him. That's pretty bad. Also, I don't know if you've seen these other set photos that were released from Captain America Civil War, but it's believed that this is Wakanda. And I can't believe that's supposed to be Wakanda. Wakanda is supposed to be an incredibly advanced civilization. It's like Asgard on Earth. And it's a big selling point for Wakanda. It's supposed to be a beacon on a hill, and I think not only in terms of science, because it has this natural resource of vibranium, but also in terms of I think African culture, the black community. That this is the ideal city. This is the utopia that can exist when it's allowed to. So, by the way, I don't know if anyone's seen the Key and Peele sketch Negro Town. It's hilarious. Check it out on YouTube. I'll put a link below in the video description. But it's not only funny, but it's really poignant as a social commentary as well. And I think that Black Panther, in an action blockbustery sense, needs to be that. And it has to have tremendous respect for the characters it's depicting. And I think that Marvel sometimes, as it's showing, it can't handle such a delicate task. And so I think they need Ava DuVernay, who really, I think, understands the black perspective, to come in there and handle this correctly and respectfully and really put its best foot forward. T'Challa needs to be this amazing character that's not only a cool action hero, but is a great superhero and a great leader, and a great leader of his country. That's all really, really important. And I think Ava DuVernay can do that. I also think she might be willing to make it a little darker, a little more sophisticated, and that's something I think the MCU is lacking. Some of you pointed out to me the recent headline that Kevin Feige said, yeah, the MCU's never going dark. And I would say to Kevin Feige, never say never, because DC is coming down the line and they are going to be super dark, and you know, Netflix, your own Netflix initiative is super dark, and people like that. And I think there might be a change in what audiences want to see, and you need to be able to, you know, be liquid, Kevin Feige. You need to be able to change with your audience. And so I think that, you know, it's not a contract when he said the MCU will never go dark, but it's never good to have gone back on your word. I think he should have said, we have no plans to go dark, but we always like to keep our options open here at the MCU. So I think spectacular news. I know a lot of you are excited about it, and I think that if you aren't excited about it, you should be. Go watch Selma, and then you will be excited about it. Trust me, please watch Selma. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day has to do with the Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, which is ramping up its publicity for what is the final entry in this installment of the franchise. I think they're really obviously going to try and expand it with sequels and spin-offs or prequels. But they have a new portrait that's been revealed, courtesy of Vanity Fair, because they're releasing a new book at the Cannes Film Festival, and also this portrait to really, I think Lionsgate's been very good at having the prestige element to the Hunger Games. And I think they're helped by the Capitol, which kind of has that Vanity Fair Cannes gloss to it. So they released this portrait, the sisters' portrait, and the reason Vanity Fair did it is because their editor writes the introduction to this book of portraits by photographer Tim Palin that's going to be released. And it's going to have all the portraits that they've had for all the posters, really great collection of posters, as we all know at this point, but also some new portraits and some new images. So they would like you to pick this up. They're really trying to push the merchandising angle with the Hunger Games franchise as well, because they're trying to rev up to theme parks, etc. They really want to get this franchise operating on all cylinders, which I totally understand. But with the sister portrait, I think that it actually underscores how this franchise has failed to really develop the relationship between Katniss and her sister Prim. As anyone who's a fan of the books knows and has read them, that's a very important relationship, and obviously the filmmakers knew that going in. So I'm surprised they didn't do a better job sowing the seeds. This very article that talks about it says, oh, well, everyone focuses on the Team Gale or Team Peeta, but there's no focus on the sisters. And it's like, yeah, and it's your own fault, Hunger Games, because you didn't do a good enough job developing that. And when you consider the success of Frozen, which also focused on sisters, you can see a missed opportunity there for the Hunger Games. Now, of course, the Hunger Games is doing just fine, but I'll be curious to see, people were unhappy with the way Mockingjay Part 1 turned out. Overall, I loved the movie. It still did very well, but it was a little bit depreciated from Catching Fire, I think. Not as on target, commercially or critically or with the fans. And so I do have some concern about Mockingjay Part 2 if it's going to try and hinge so much on this big thing with the relationship between Katniss and Prim. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but it's it's not something that's going to really hit the way it needs to because they didn't do the groundwork. They didn't do the groundwork that was necessary. And this is one instance where adapting a book, sometimes the filmmakers get a little sloppy and they just expect the fans to take their own homework they did by reading the books into the film adaptations. But for those of us who didn't read the books, I just don't think it's going to work as well as it should. So I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think this is a missed opportunity for the Hunger Games? How do you feel about the way the Katniss-Prim relationship has been depicted in the movies? And what do you think of this portrait? Do you think this is the start of finally getting some much-needed attention, a spotlight on that relationship? Or do you think it's just not working? And do you plan on buying that book? All right, so the third story of the day, talk about franchises that, have to do a little bit of work on themselves, and that's the Harry Potter franchise. Because the third story in morning movie news is always for something that's not going to generate a lot of viewership, because I can only do metadata and a thumbnail for the top 2 stories. There just isn't room for all 3. So I use the third story often to push something that I think you should hear about, but I know isn't going to drive any traffic. But today, I've given that to a Fantastic Beasts story, the upcoming Harry Potter spin-off, so to speak, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, because this thing just has no heat. And I think the latest casting announcement, well, it's nearing being an official announcement, is also not going to generate any heat. So I think Warner Brothers publicity department, I believe Kevin Tsujihara has actually put an individual, you know, I think the Harry Potter films now do have their own Kevin Feige. I'll have to double check that. But, you know, they don't have one for the DCU, but someone is in charge of what's going on with the Harry Potter initiative, from the theme parks to the studio tour to the movies, etc. And I think that that person needs to really take a hard look at Fantastic Beasts and why it isn't gelling with the public just yet. So what is this casting thing? Well, the role has now officially been offered to Eddie Redmayne for Newt Scamander, the lead in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And he apparently likes the script. They were waiting to officially offer it to him until he read J.K. Rowling's script. Apparently he loves it, so now they have to work out the parameters of the deal. So everything's moving forward, and you should expect Eddie Redmayne to be cast as Newt Scamander very soon. Now, I can understand why they want him. He's a delightful human being. I got the chance to interview him for The Theory of Everything. He was just a sweetheart. He's the kind of person you want good things to happen to, and I think he would really go above and beyond to promote Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. But he's not yet a box office draw, so I'm not quite sure how he'll be accepted by mainstream audiences, especially since they're not too excited about this film so far. But I can understand why they want him. He's an Oscar winner for The Theory of Everything, playing Stephen Hawking, and will most likely be an Oscar nominee, if not a back-to-back winner, a la Tom Hanks, for the upcoming The Danish Girl. But The Danish Girl, you know, it's about one of the first transgender patients. It's pretty adult material, and I will also be interested to see how it works taking an actor like that, who's associated with something that's so adult, and putting them what's supposed to be an all-ages, family-friendly franchise. But, because of the internet and the way the news cycle works these days, I think people of all ages are exposed to pretty adult stories, so it might not be a factor. But I'm curious, why aren't you excited about Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them? Why does this not generate a lot of online interest yet? And what do you think of Eddie Redmayne in the lead role? Do you think that will help the franchise and get more attention for it? Or do you think it's another meh casting announcement? Alright, so those are the three stories of the day, and the viewer question comes from Tyler Faraz, and Tyler says, I thought this was a fun question. He says, Grace, do you think that Batman v Superman should have maintained its original opening date to compete with the second entry in the Avengers franchise? Well, actually, not the second, in the Captain America franchise, third entry in the Captain America franchise, but we know what Tyler means. So, for those of you who don't remember or didn't know in the first place, Captain America Civil War was the Captain America third film, or there was actually, I think it was actually an untitled Marvel project, had the first weekend in May 2016 already set. And then when Batman v Superman was announced, they were like, we're going head-to-head with you, Marvel, get out of our way. And then Marvel said, well, actually, we're going to put Captain America Civil War there. And when DC saw how well Captain America the Winter Soldier was received, they were like, yeah, you know what, peace out. I said they played a game of chicken, and DC totally blinked and moved to a March release date. And I think that didn't make the film look so great, and I think, it showed a little bit of lack of, a lack of faith in their own material, and also, it's another situation where Marvel is victorious in a DC Marvel matchup, and you want to try and minimize those instances. However, I feel that DC did not make a mistake. At the end of the day, I think the summer movie season is expanding really out to basically March. I think you're seeing some really strong entries hit the box office in March and April, and I think almost to some degree the first weekend in May is maybe a little bit too old school as the first weekend of summer. That might be something that's disappearing, and I think the first weekend in May might lose some of its prestige as a release date going forward. And it's booked pretty far in advance at this point, actually, as well. So some people might regret having booked those dates, but I guess you just want to hold on to them just in case. But I think that March has become a huge, position. I think March has been very good to Zack Snyder personally with his own releases. Both 300 and Watchmen were released in March. And so I think it's a good release date. Also because Batman v Superman is a wild card. Audiences don't know what to make of it. They don't know if it's going to be good. They don't know if it's going to be bad. They don't know if they should trust Zack Snyder and what he's doing. So I think that March is a good date for that kind of movie. I think you're seeing the Wolverine 3 is also set for a March release in 2017. So March is becoming a major player, and I think that because of this move, Batman v Superman has it all to themselves, and they have a significant amount of time, like a month and a half, to get out ahead of Captain America Civil War, and maybe even do a little damage to Captain America Civil War by being willing to go and be the dark superhero movie that, as we just talked about today, Kevin Feige is unwilling to make. So I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think that DC was right to move? Initially, I didn't think so, but now I think they're in a really good place, and potentially an even better place than they were before. But I'm curious to your thoughts on it. So share your thoughts down below about today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.